Welcome, welcome, welcome to episode 350 of the show with no name. I'm your humble host, Nick, and in today's episode, we're going to be visiting another little old farmer pioneer cemetery out here in the middle of nowhere in Washington State. This cemetery goes by the name of the Lone Pine Cemetery. Let's get into this. The Lone Pine Cemetery holds historical value due to its association with early pioneer settlers in the region. The cemetery's origins date back to the late 19th century, with the earliest recorded burials occurring in 1883. Notably, the Kaiser twins, born in 1882 and deceased in 1883, and Ruthie Cozier, who also passed away in 1883. They were among the first internments in this cemetery. The area surrounding the cemetery, known as Lone Pine, developed as a stagecoach stop between Farmington and Cheney. The name Lone Pine is believed to have originated from a solitary pine tree that stood prominently on a hill in the otherwise barren landscape, serving as a landmark for travelers. A log cabin was eventually constructed to function as a post office, stage depot, general store, and schoolhouse, contributing to the community's development. I have a number of interesting people and stories to talk about in today's episode, so I'm going to start out with Thomas Carson Click. He was born on November 28, 1857 in Oregon, and he would get murdered at the age of 32 on December 16, 1889 in Colfax, Washington. I found an article in the Colfax Commoner that reads, "On Monday morning at about 9:30, the sharp report of a pistol, followed in rapid succession by 4 others, startled everyone on Main Street and drew a hurried crowd towards the City Hall building, from where a man was seen to totter across the street towards the Farmers Hotel, with his hands uplifted and crying in agonizing tones. Near the entrance of the hallway, another was desperately clinging to the back and arms of a stout, burly character, in whose hands flourished a smoking pistol. The former was Thomas Click, a farmer of the northeastern part of the county, his body pierced by a bullet. The latter was Ben Blanton, his cowardly assassin. The murdered man reached the vicinity of the hotel when he fell, writhing in intense agony. Willing hands soon lifted him up and carried him into the office room of the hotel, where a number of physicians lent their aid to staunch a gaping wound in his left side. The wife of the unfortunate man, who had accompanied her husband to town, was brought to where the body lay in the last throes of death. The scene which followed was a heart-rending one, which beggars description. Clasped in the arm of his life companion, her tears showering upon his prostrate form, the spirit of the murdered man took flight. He was dead. In the meantime, Deputy Sheriff Young had seized the assassin and, assisted by Officer Donnelly, had hurried him off to the county jail, where he was securely locked in one of the iron cells. The particulars connected with this awful tragedy show the shooting to have been a cold-blooded, deliberate, cowardly assault. Blanton was under arrest for the assault upon Samuel Doble, of which the readers of this paper have been previously informed. An indictment has been found against him by the grand jury, and his trial was to come off in a few days. Samuel Doble, J.R. Bennett, and Thomas Click, the murdered man, all of the Oakesdale vicinity, were the chief prosecuting witnesses. It was for this that Click fell a victim to an unerring shot, and that the other 2 were not also slain was no fault of Blanton's, as the particulars will show. The three names parties were together, walking up the street, and had just passed the hallway of the City Hall building, where the Superior Court is held, when Blanton stepped out behind them, leveled his pistol at Click, and fired. The other two turned quickly, and a second shot fired at Bennett passed through the latter's clothing close to the body. Bennett quickly seized the ruffian from behind, grabbed both arms, and attempted to hold the pistol toward the ground. In this, he only partly succeeded, and Blanton continued to discharge the three remaining barrels at Doble, who kept dodging to the right and left. Fortunately, the latter escaped unhurt. One of the balls, however, passing through his coat sleeve and barely scratching his wrist. At this stage of the proceeding, Deputy Sheriff Young reached the scene and grabbed the revolver and its owner just as the last shot had been fired. It was all the work of a few minutes. The excitement which followed the shooting was at a high pitch among the crowd which had been attracted to the scene, and increased in heat when the death of Click was announced. But no demonstrations of mob violence were threatened, though the feeling against the murderer was bitterly intense. The body of the murdered man was transported to Hall and Noble's morgue, and an inquest held by Coroner Shaw. In accordance with the facts above related, brought before the inquest by various witnesses, the jury returned a verdict as follows. We, the undersigned jurors, duly summoned by D.H. Shaw, coroner of Whitman County, and sworn to inquire concerning the death of Thomas Click, after due inquiry, find that said Thomas Click came to his death at the town of Colfax in Whitman County, Washington State, on the 16th day of December 1889, from a pistol shot wound in the left shoulder, ranging through the body and lodging near the heart. And that said wound was inflicted by Benjamin Blanton. Thomas Click was a young man of about 30 years old. He was a well-respected farmer, married, and leaves a wife and one child. His mother and several brothers reside near Lone Pine. The body was removed to the latter place on Tuesday night and was interred in the Lone Pine Cemetery on Wednesday. Ben Blanton, the murderer, is about 50 years of age. His life had been that of a desperate and fearless man. He came to Whitman County several years ago from Oregon, and since his residence here has been a prominent figure in the courts of the county. It is said that this is the second murder committed by him, the first having been committed in Oregon, in which penitentiary, it is also said, he served a term of several years. Parties who knew the man in Oregon give this information. Now I'm going to talk about a 2-year-old little boy named Gay Olson, who was born in 1902 in Whitman County, Washington, and he would pass away tragically on November 18, 1904 in Whitman County, Washington. Gay Olson was the fourth child of Alfred Olson and Laura Warner. He had 3 siblings, Whitney, Ethel, and Oscar. The 2-year-old son of Mr. and Mrs. Alfred Olson was burned to death on November 18th. The baby with its brother was playing with matches when its clothes caught fire. Mrs. Olson was lying sick in bed, and the child ran to the bedside. The mother was unable to render assistance and was compelled to see her child devoured before her eyes. Miss Olson was very sick and was herself severely burned. And she would pass away the same day that Gay Olson passed away. I don't know if she was sick beforehand or if it was a result of the burns that she got while she was trying to put the fire out. I'm really unclear about all of that, but they were both buried here in the Lone Pine Cemetery together. Then I want to spend a moment talking about Ruth Cozier, whom I mentioned earlier in this episode. She was born on January 24th, 1878 in Oregon, and her family would migrate to Whitman County, Washington at some point in her life, where she would pass away on October 4th, 1883 at the age of 5. She was one of the first people to be buried in this cemetery because her parents, John and Martha, were some of the earliest settlers in the area coming. And last but not least, I want to touch on the Chase family for a moment, specifically Ellen and her husband, Andrew Chase. Together, they would have 4 children, and they're both buried here. And while I couldn't really find any information about their lives or, what happened to them, I was able to find a few pictures that you guys are looking at now. And I really like to connect the pictures with the headstones. I think it makes things a lot more real.